Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast. I am joined by Nick Feller or NorcalTenkara on Instagram. Nick, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brennan.
Yeah.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I followed you on Instagram for quite a while. It's been cool to watch your journey, and I've learned a little bit more just through our little bit of talking online planning for this episode. And I find it really interesting that you specifically are looking at like the backcountry backpacking aspect of Tenkara versus a lot of us, myself included, like we're always thrilled by the idea, but we don't get into it. So,
I mean, these days I converted to pretty much I fish every water with some sort of a fixed line rod, whether it be Tenkara, a carp rod or Honru rod, K-Roo rods, but that's a whole nother topic. The backcountry is what initially drew me to Tenkara. I was backpacking. I used to always bring I had a telescoping spinning rod actually, so I was like halfway there. I was so close. And I'd spend more time setting it up, and I didn't like that, and it was bulky and heavy. And when I was packing for a smaller through hike, it was after I did the Tahoe Rim Trail with my conventional spinning rod, and it like I think I fished twice on the whole trail and caught fish one day. It just wasn't that convenient. So I looked for a more convenient, like ultralight, super simple way to fish, and found a Reddit talking about Tenkara rods and fell down that rabbit hole, and here we are.
how long ago would you say that is that you got started and down that rabbit hole?
I want to say it was the end of 2020 because I did the Tahoe Rim Trail in 2020, and that's when I decided I need to lighten my load.
Yeah, no, I was similar in that aspect. As I started out trying to get smaller. I mean, I've Western fly fished for 15 years, and I was like, oh, telescoping fly rods, which are garbage. Don't waste your money on them. The one that I bought, there's only two companies that I found that make a telescopic fly rod. Eagle Claw being one of them, and that rod is very cheap. It's a fiberglass rod, and it broke the second time I used it. The other one, I'm actually intrigued by. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right, but it's Reyr, R-E-Y-R. They do a Tenkara rod as well.
Yeah, my friend Taylor has one of their, I think he has their 2 or 3 weight. I can't remember. He hasn't brought it out on a trip that I've been with, but he's told me it's pretty neat. He's still Tenkara rods, but
yeah, that one intrigues me just because the line runs through the middle of it instead of still having the eyelets like the Eagle Claw one does. But I've used a Western fly rod, I think, twice in the past 3 years, so it's not worth the investment for me.
There's very few situations where I think like an actual fly rod like that would be useful in the backpacking that I do, and that's when I'm in a high alpine lake where their fish are not at the shoreline, but I can just see them rising out in the middle. I have had those moments where I was like, dude, if I just had one of them little Reyr rods, I could just shoot that out there. Yeah. But you can also, like, once you get adept with casting various lengths of line, you can cast a 20-meter line with a 12, 13-foot Tenkara rod.
Absolutely. It might not be the most pleasant experience in the world, but it is doable. Yeah. And you're going to hand line quite a bit, but...
Oh, definitely.
Well, that's cool that... I kind of got into Tenkara the same way. I was looking for something to minimalize, go as small as possible, as light as possible. I ended up with a cheap Amazon rod as my first rod. I think there's a lot of people that are the same way. But
my first rod was the Tenkara Rod Co Sierra rod.
Okay.
Just because I live in the Sierras, so I liked the name of it. It seemed like a good size.
There you go. It fit. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen them, those yellow Chinese rods that you see on Amazon.
Yeah, I think Tenkara Addict has a couple of YouTube videos using them.
He does, and what intrigues me with that, speaking of his videos, he actually has a couple rods that one of his viewers made that are that rod that they put a cork handle on.
I've seen that. Yeah, it does seem interesting.
Yeah, it would
If
definitely.
you're familiar with Riverworks, I think it is Riverworks Rod Company. They'll put a custom, like a carbon fiber grip on, I think, any rod that you send them.
Good to know.
Because I know someone posted a picture that they did it to a River Peak Kiwami and a Oni rod, and I've also seen them do it to a Tenru rod.
Good to know. I'll have to look into that just because I feel like that would change the balance of that rod completely and make it to where it
That's
might not be unbearable.
Well, I've thought about that with some rods that are like meant to be balanced with the weight of the cork. If you replace that with carbon fiber, it might make the fish entirely different.
Yeah. Well, sweet. It's cool to hear kind of like how you got started into Tenkara. What would you say was like, other than diving down the rabbit hole, what was the first step for you into like delving more into it?
Um, Really, I saw it, I read about it, I ordered one. As soon as I got it, I ran out to, I think, a local. Yeah, I went to a local trout stream, and I think, yeah, the first fish I caught was a tiny little rainbow, and I just became obsessed. And everything. From that point on, I would go to the local bluegill pond, and I would just practice hook sets on bluegill all day for like weeks, and pretty much till the end of that season. And then the following year, I believe it was 2021, I never went anywhere without a Tenkara rod.
So you mentioned your first rod was a Sierra. Um, what was one of the deciding factors for you in choosing your first rod?
Um, the price point, the warranty. I enjoy the fun colors that the Tenkara Rod Co rods are, like the Sierras, that crisp little sky blue.
Yeah.
Um, Everything I read said terrific customer service, and I emailed. I don't know, it wasn't an email. I followed one of the owners, Tuna, on Instagram, and pretty much every time I had a question when I was trying to decide on my rod, he was hot on it with answers, and I was like, okay, like sounds like if I even have another issue down the road, like these are the guys I want behind it.
That's awesome. You know, I've heard great things about. Really, I don't think, now that I think about it, I don't think there's a rod company that I've heard bad things about their customer service. Everyone seems to really excel in that category.
That's very true. Like, yeah, I learned that way down the line. Pretty much there isn't a bad choice. As long as we're all Tenkara fishing, we're all friends.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's cool that, I mean, when I started out getting into Tenkara, I followed Tuna and those guys, and it's cool to watch all of their adventures and stuff. And like you said, when you reach out to these guys, like my first experience with a company's owner was Wasatch Tenkara Rods.
Oh,
And
Ruben is a super nice guy.
yeah, Ruben's phenomenal to work with. In fact, I was looking to buy a big fish rod. And so I went and looked at all these different rods, and they were the last one on my list. And I messaged their page, and Ruben reached out and was like, "Let's go fishing.
Nice.
Come out. I'll bring all of the rods. You can look at them all." And just it was incredible to see that customer service from the owners specifically. And so that it was just cool to see that. You don't see that with a lot of companies. So
For sure.
all right. So as you were getting into Tenkara, when did you feel like you were finally starting to kind of get a grip on it and understand what you needed to do with it?
Um, there was actually like one trip in particular that I had that moment because I had that instant success that I told you about where I went out to a stream and I just became obsessed. But then that first spring, I could not catch a trout to save my life. Couldn't like find one. I was like, what am I doing wrong? Do I suck at fishing or do I just suck at Tenkara? And I don't. I still don't have an answer to that. I might suck at fishing. I don't know. But then I was out. I'm not going to name where. I was in a wilderness area in California backpacking, and it had been one that I went to the year prior, and I caught tons of fish with a spinning rod. So I had my hopes were super high, and I caught nothing. And I was so upset. And I think a week or 2 weeks later, went back to a slightly different lake in the same wilderness area, and fish just cruising the banks everywhere. I think I caught six rainbow trout, and nothing was under a foot long. And I was like, okay, Tenkara doesn't suck. I was just doing something wrong. But now I had my aha moment, and they were like, I'll never forget that day. I was casting a little pheasant tail nymph and letting it sink, and I was just sight fishing them. And I'd watch this big old trout swim by, and I'd lift the pheasant tail up and just smoke it every time.
That's awesome. I mean, when you get into
and
those,
that's not like technically Tenkara fishing, because it's in a lake, obviously.
Yeah.
But that was my first aha moment.
No, and it's crazy when you get into those super clear water situations where you can see the fish, and like I said, you just watch them come up to your fly, because then there's no question about it. It's just, okay, I'm setting the hook right now.
And the heartbreak when they turn away, when they come up and get about an inch from it and then just turn off. Like, why?
Yeah, I do during the winter, obviously, in Utah, my snow isn't always my friend, especially this last year. So I get into ice fishing a little bit, and it's same thing. You'll be watching down the ice hole, jigging your little jigs and stuff, and you'll see the fish come up to it and then swim away. And it's like, no, don't do that.
That must be fun. I've only tried ice fishing once, and it was horribly unsuccessful.
You'll have to come out and visit, man. We'll put you on some fish.
I'd love to.
Yeah, it's crazy when you're just watching the fish. Like you said, it's so satisfying seeing them take the fly. Watching them swim away is so disappointing. And even in streams and stuff, you get the same thing. You'll see a fish swim right up to it and then turn. It's like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, or the mist strikes on top. If you're skirting the fly on the surface of the water, when it comes up and misses, you're like, ah.
Yeah, and you're always set happy when you're fishing on top too. So as soon as you see him coming and splash a little bit, you're setting the hook, and it's like, nope, he didn't have it yet. Yeah, been there, done that a lot of times, and I'll be there again, I'm sure. In your experience, what are 3 things you know now that you wish you had known when you started?
To not be afraid to experiment with like what you want to do. Don't get set in one way, and just try different things. But at the same time, don't overcomplicate anything. Just keep it simple. Fish everywhere. When I first started, I used to ignore tiny little blue lines and tiny little creeks. And now I've learned that those tiny little creeks can have surprisingly huge fish. So
yeah,
I'm a firm believer that if there's water, you should fish it. Unless it's like a weird puddle. Like, don't go to the extremes. But
I mean, on the counter argument to that, I watched a video 2 days ago of a guy catching bluegill out of a drain in the middle of town. So
I saw that. I saw the same video, I think.
He's like, yeah, there's like a pond on each end of this, and I figured if there's fish in both of those, there's got to be fish here, and sure enough. Yeah, I wouldn't fish a drain, but
those are probably some questionable fluids on those fish.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
But hey, he was catching fish.
Yeah.
And Tenkara would have worked really well for what he was doing. So.
And that was 2 things, I believe. So a third thing that I wish I knew is to get into fly tying earlier. I mean, I only was into Tenkara for about 6 months before I picked up fly tying, but not everyone does that. And if you're like thinking about it and intimidated by tying your own flies, just try it. It's so much fun and easier than you think.
Well, more than that, like, it's relaxing. Like, I'll sit down at night and just kick on something on TV, tie up some flies, and just relax.
And it's one further step of connection to you and that fish, because now you've created what you've enticed them to bite.
And if you are not currently tying and you get into it, the satisfaction you will have the first time you catch a fish on something you tied is uncomparable.
Oh yes, Yeah, your new PB on a personal fly. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No.
crazy experience. Do it. You won't regret it. You can get cheap fly tying kits at Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's that come with everything you need to get started. Just do it.
Yeah, my first vise was one of those cheap, just like a pinch clamp, nothing fancy.
I still tie on a cheap vise, so
My vise is not expensive by any means. I think it was $90. But yeah, my first one was like 20. So
yeah. And
I've seen somebody tie with a pair of pliers. So.
I have seen that as well, or the forceps. I'll use forceps to hold the hook. I've seen that quite often.
I believe Nate Camp, if you're familiar with him, he uses one of these little things. I think he'll hold it with one of those and tie in hand. Or he holds it with something small like that. Maybe it's an X-Acto knife or something. But he has a really impressive video of tying one in hand.
I've seen people use the X-Acto knives before, but that's crazy. One of those, I feel like if I was trying to use one of those little hooks, I would just twist the hook around too much. It would just be a problem. But hey, maybe he's got steadier hands than I do.
That man's a wizard.
So, I mean, obviously we talked about that first moment when you really like connected with Tenkara. What would you say is your most memorable experience with Tenkara?
That's a tough one. Probably, can I count like the entire? I did one. If anybody didn't follow it, along with my adventure last year, I did half of the Pacific Crest Trail, and my favorite part of that was the High Sierra. I essentially did the John Muir Trail. So if I could count that entire thing, I picked up a Sierra Grand Slam along the thing. I got a rainbow trout, brook trout, brown trout, golden trout, and cutthroat trout. But it wasn't all in the same day, but it was all over one long trip.
That's
So
awesome.
that would be my most memorable. But other than that, if I had to pick like one specific day, it was probably I elected to not climb Mount Whitney when the other people in my party wanted to. So I hung out at Timberline Lake and I think I caught over 100 golden trout just standing there with Mount Whitney in my view. It was the most amazing experience.
That is one that is on my bucket list is golden trout. I haven't got into any of those yet. One day.
Come on out.
I know
that there might be some that they stock somewhere in Utah. I know they stock some in like Colorado.
Yeah, we've got some non-native locations in West Utah as well as a couple in the high Uintas in eastern Utah. But I'd like to get out and get some natives one day.
Yeah.
All right. As far as like getting further into Tenkara and growing in your experience, what made you decide? I mean, when we were talking, you specifically mentioned that backpacking is what you do and backcountry fishing is what you do. What made you decide that that was the route that you wanted to go with it?
That was the route that I wanted to go with Tenkara.
Yeah.
That was the route that I was already going, and I looked for the most efficient fishing method to take with me. I've gotten away from backpacking a little bit. I haven't gone on a trip this year, but we also had a torrential winter, and everything's just now starting to thaw out. I have a trip planned for the week after this one. I have a little 2-nighter, and then I have a 4-nighter at the end of the month coming up. So I am excited to get back in the backcountry here pretty soon. But really, I like to hike to places and back, like that's backpacking. Obviously, you're hiking to camp. But I like to just go a couple miles from the trailhead where the fish don't see as much pressure. And a Tenkara rod's ultra portable, so obviously that's, in my opinion, the best choice to take is when you're going hiking fishing.
Absolutely. So, what is some advice that you would give, Like, if you had one piece of advice that you were giving someone that was just getting started, what would it be?
Fish everywhere. Like, don't just get laser focused into one spot that you want to fish. Like, if you walk up to a stream or river, fish in there. Fish everything in front of you on there, and then fish there. But cover all the water possible.
I agree with that. You know, when people talk to me about Tenkara and they're like, well, how are you catching fish, or how do you catch more fish? Because I do catch a lot more fish Tenkara fishing than I'd ever caught. And it's like you said, you just fish literally everything. It's, you see a hole that's
quick, efficient casts. Instead of back casting, flip your cast into another little beautiful spot and then let it run and flip it back into it.
Yeah. And that's just it, is you get out there and it's like, hey, I know there's fish in that hole 50 feet away. I can't reach that far, so I'm going to fish all my way to that hole.
Exactly.
And it's incredible how much water I was missing with my spinning rod and my fly rod that you get to cover when you're doing Tenkara.
Yeah, which is funny because everybody thinks about Tenkara and the biggest drawback is your lack of range. And my argument is you don't really need range. I think even with conventional gear, most bites occur within 40 feet, maybe even less than that. Most bites occur within 30 feet of the angler, and you can cover that much water and more easily with a Tenkara rod.
Absolutely. So when people think Tenkara, primarily they're thinking trout. I mean, I know that we talked a little bit about carp and things like that earlier. What are species that you're targeting that are not trout?
I like to target bluegill, other panfish like sunfish, bass, largemouth bass, spotted bass. I haven't caught a smallmouth bass yet, but I've heard there is a stream opening up, or I think it opened up June 15th, but I haven't been up to check it out yet. But I've heard there's smallmouth that you catch there, about the size of your hand. And then I do like to target carp with a big fish rod. Carp are fun to catch. I just caught my first this year. Ooh. My first on a fixed line rod.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I've got a largemouth that you might be able to count as largemouth. It was like that big. Bluegill are fun to target though. Then
and pike minnow, I think they are.
Yeah.
Sacramento pike minnow. It's like a long, skinny fish.
Mm-hmm.
But they get big. I haven't caught like a huge one on a fixed line rod, but I've caught a huge one on a spinning rod. I thought I had the biggest trout of my life.
Yeah, they fight hard. That is for sure. I caught last month. I was in Idaho and I hooked into one, and it was only about 11 inches, but it fought like a 16 plus inch trout. But they're fun to catch. That's for sure.
Yeah, generally though, I do primarily target trout.
Yeah, like I said, when people think Tenkara, that's what it is trout fishing. And I mean, the last episode I did with Trout Conjurer, he specifically, like, that's why he got into Tenkara, was he wanted to trout fish. He was a bass fisherman. Yeah. And that's like pretty much exclusively what he does now is trout. But I mean, for me, it's fun to just see what other people are doing. I mean, I talked with Dre Fornasario in one episode, and he's catching anything that is in the water.
Yeah.
So it's just fun to see the different avenues that people take with it.
Yeah. I swear I think I saw somebody catch a gar.
It wouldn't surprise me.
That was probably a wild bite on the fixed line.
Yeah.
Do you have I call him a friend, though I've never actually met him, but I have a friend in Puerto Rico who catches peacock bass and small tarpon with fixed line rods. And he has a video somewhere, I don't know if it's on YouTube or Instagram, where he hooks into a modest tarpon and his rod just explodes and he just starts cracking up laughing. And that's when I was like, I like this guy. He's if that's the reaction you have, like, Like, what did you expect? You're going after a tarpon.
No, and I mean there are rods on the market now that could probably handle it, but
Sure, he was using a introductory 12-foot rod.
yeah, and it's crazy. Speaking of rods that can handle it, I fished the Wasatch Tenkara Phoenix Rising.
Ooh, how's that?
That rod is incredible. I caught a 16-inch trout on it, and it felt like it was a little fingerling trout. Just manhandled that fish. But you look at rods like that that are made for stuff like that, and it's like, man, the things I'm going to do with that rod when I get my hands on it for good.
A few friends and I do go out we go out a handful of times every year and target steelhead. Only one of us has hooked into one successfully and has not landed it. I know there's some people back east that are catching Great Lakes steelhead, but
Yeah.
we're out here going for the California steelhead.
Yeah, I grew up in Idaho, so I've spent some time fishing steelhead. A lot of it is unsuccessfully fishing steelhead, but
I think they call them the fish of 1,000 casts. And then I think of what's a muskie, a fish of 10,000 casts or something.
yeah, that's another one that one day I'll get on a Tenkara rod. But hopefully hoping this summer or end of this fall, I guess, that I'll be able to catch the second steelhead run in Idaho and maybe have some luck. We'll see.
There's a couple smaller rivers near me that most of the steelhead are like right around 16, 17 inches. And so I'm hoping I can go get one of those on a fixed line. And I'm sure it'll pack a punch for a trout that size, but
Yeah.
they're pretty skinny water. I think it would be a good one to try to attack rather than like the Sacramento River here. That's humongous. I couldn't even imagine trying to pick that apart with a 10-car rod.
No, and that's what's crazy is you watch some of the videos of guys targeting steelhead on the Tenkara rod, like I said, back Great Lakes steelhead that they're going after, and they're catching, almost 30-inch fish on these Tenkara rods that are not made for fish that big.
Yeah.
But they're doing it.
My friend, I'm not going to name him. Sure, Sage Heart Tenkara. It's on his page. He caught a salmon last year, a small one, but it was pretty cool. Like for a salmon, it was really small. It was like that. I can't remember which species of salmon. It's the one that's all red with a black head, the sockeye maybe.
Possibly. I'm not super familiar with the salmon species either. So.
Same. I've never really salmon fished, so
That's I know what.
I really did that growing up.
Yeah, I know what kokanee looked like because I grew up with kokanee and I've got kokanee in Utah. But other than that, I know that they're salmon.
I know we have king.
Yeah, king, chinook.
Like every salmon has two names though, so that's where it starts getting weird.
Right. No, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that maybe one day I'll delve into a little bit on an Alaska trip or something. But
that'd be fun.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of an Alaska trip, I know a guy that just bought a bunch of big water rods to take to Alaska this year, targeting salmon. So
probably Aaron.
No, his name is.
Aaron better meet up.
Oh, what is it? His last name's Hansen. I can't think of what his first name is right now. But
Aaron is Appalachian AF. He's going to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah, no, Aaron bought the Phoenix Rising. He's got it on order. They're shipping out this week. If you didn't know that.
Very nice.
But yeah, he's going for him. But this guy bought 3 Rodzillas and a Psycho, and he's like, "I'm gonna go catch some salmon." I'm like, "Dude, send me pictures."
Have fun, man.
Yeah, he was loving it. It'll be
big fish are cool, but I really just enjoy catching little 10-inch trout out of little creeks.
I just like catching every fish. I mean, I'm not picky.
I agree.
So as far as flies go, I mean, I know when you started, you mentioned that trip that you really felt like you knew that Tenkara didn't suck. You were using a pheasant tail.
It's just me.
Yeah, I think that's the case in most situations. It's just the angler.
But yeah, I was using a beadhead pheasant tail nymph, which is arguably still one of my favorite patterns for stillwater fishing.
I won't argue that. I'll switch it a little bit. I'm going with a beadhead prince nymph, but
I was gonna say either a pheasant tail, a prince, or a copper john, and
yeah.
I saw on the lake.
But outside of that, what flies are you fishing primarily when you're fishing Tenkara?
I I'm changing. I'm getting better this year, but I almost exclusively fish a white with a badger hackle Sakasa Kabari, which is the iconic Tenkara fly with the reverse
Yeah.
hackle. Might have one sitting here for just for yeah. This is my favorite fly.
Okay. You know, that was one of the things that blew my mind getting into Tenkara fishing, where I Western fly fish for 15 years, was just how simple the flies are. And when I first started looking at it, it's like, there's no way that this hook with thread and a feather, and that's it, is going to catch a fish.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of things that go into it. Like you said, simplicity is a big thing, but just the way that hackle pulses in the water.
The way you can manipulate it.
Yeah.
This year I'm getting more into using a Futsu Kabari, which is it has a stiff hackle instead of a soft hackle, which is it keeps its form better in fast, swift water, and you can pulse it. It goes with the current. It's fun.
Yeah, I've got some of both. The Futsus, I like them. Like you said, fast water's good. I honestly fish them closer to a dry fly because of the stiff hackle. They just plop right on top.
They're fun to use pom-pom.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite way to do that. But I also love throwing Sakasa Kabari into super swift current because the wet soft tackle just gets thrown around. I think it works great. My favorite way to fish is in like tumbling riffles, and I'll just cast my Kabari at the top, let it drift through the riffles, and fish on.
Yeah, I've got one
right there behind you. I can see like 6 little holes where I want to just.
This is one of my favorite streams in existence, and it's like 10 minutes from my apartment, which is great.
Heck yeah.
But I've got a fly that I tie, and originally I was the only person that I knew that tied it, but now I know that Dre ties one that's similar as well. And it's a Kabari that has a bead head, but instead of having the bead head, it's got a bead body. And so it sucks up right underneath the hackle on there.
If I'm picturing it right, Nate Camp does one, but he does the Ajun Kabari with the hackle facing like a wet fly, and then has the bead for the body. But I think he uses a glass bead.
Yeah, so I've done glass beads and tungsten beads, whatever, just based on where I'm fishing and how bad I need that fly to get down deep. But it's interesting because
some of the high schools this year I've been using a lot of Perdigon mints to get down deep.
Yeah, I've got a fair good share of those in my box as well. But that fly specifically, I tie it with a very long, soft hackle on it, and that way it just moves all over. And
heck yeah,
it fishes well. It was one of those things that I tied it for the first time just as an experimental thing, like a couple months after I started Tenkara fishing. Is like, hey, why not? And have continued tying it ever since, because that first trip it was just like, holy crap, this catches a lot of fish.
Very nice.
If you could only fish one fly, I mean, I know you showed me your white Sakasa there.
It would be that 100%.
Yeah, for me,
everywhere you could imagine up and down California with that fly. It works everywhere.
Yeah, and for me, I'm gonna go away from traditional Tenkara with mine, and I've said it in an episode before, but the blowtorch nymph is just a phenomenal pattern. That
Yeah.
it's my pattern that it's like, okay, nothing's biting. I'm gonna throw this, and if I don't catch a fish, then there's something wrong.
My good friend Taylor, his go-to pattern is a killer bug with a tungsten beadhead. He calls it a dam bug because we use them with great success at tailwaters, like right at the base of the dam.
Okay,
So it was called a dam bug.
that works. Sinks
So
down a little bit better, and
yeah, I just because my go-to fly is a Sakasa Kabari, I still fish a lot of non-traditional flies with the Tenkara rod. Uh, it's fun. I fish
absolutely.
for flies; they're fun.
And that's the thing is, if it catches fish, that's all that really matters, right?
Yeah, I just like to say, try to like respect the history of Tenkara, like understand where it comes from, but have fun and do things your own way. Experiment.
Absolutely.
Not doing anything wrong. Just respect the culture and enjoy things your own way. There's a phrase in the through hiking, long distance backpacking community that goes hike your own hike, which is to hike your own hike. Don't let anybody tell you how many miles you should be doing or where you should be going, how hard your hike should be. Um, I like to say fish your own fish, which is just like it would imply, fish your own way and just enjoy it, have fun. That's actually the motto for the Fixed Line Freaks, which is a Facebook group. Anybody listening that wants to get in a Fixed Line Facebook group, check out Fixed Line Freaks and use that hashtag on Instagram too.
It's an awesome group to be a part of. There's a lot of cool posts that come across in there from a lot of good guys. I know Aaron posts in there quite a bit.
Heck yeah, Aaron he just stepped up to help moderate for admin. I'm not sure he's one of the two. I can't remember which one's which.
That's awesome. He's a good guy. So are there any techniques that you're using that might be different from what traditional Tenkara would be?
Like there's lots of traditional Tenkara techniques.
Right.
So I use most of those. I mean, most traditional techniques are like anything that you do pretty much has a traditional name. I like to do a lot of pon, which is, as I said, tap it when it's sitting on the surface and make it dance like a bug. I like to do, I hope I don't get this wrong. I apologize, anybody. I like to do Yoko Biki, which is a reverse pull, which is essentially if you're like stripping a streamer, like pulling it against the current. And then Gyaku Biki, which is forward pull, and it's pulling it with the current. And I believe there's a separate name, but I also like to pull it, like swing it basically, like swing it against the current.
Okay.
Down, but I'll describe that right.
Hey, I mean, I guide and I don't know the technical Japanese terms for most of them, so
Anybody that would like to learn more about techniques, check out Discover Tenkara. I believe if you go to Martin Sagehart Tenkara's Instagram, he might pick you up on a fifth code. But check out Discover Tenkara, and there's countless hours of videos about different techniques, manipulation techniques, traditional fly patterns, kabari patterns. It's a wonderful resource.
yeah, no, and in addition to those videos, there's a lot of good articles that they've got on their website. They're a really good resource. I looked at a lot of their stuff when I was first getting into it.
Yeah, they're great.
So, what does an ideal Tenkara trip look like for you?
Hiking off into the woods along a little creek, maybe stopping and fishing that creek, filtering some water, making lunch, hiking a few more miles on to camp at a beautiful alpine lake, fish until sunset, wake up, fish with the sunrise, and hike and fish on my way out.
I like it. What does your average trip look like?
Um, Either pull up to a creek or hike about a mile or half-mile away, find a creek, fish for a few hours, hopefully catch a few.
Love it. So, when selecting your flies, I mean, I know we've talked about several different flies here. When selecting a fly, are you matching the hatch or are you just fishing whatever?
Generally, I just fish whatever. I like to say I get a feeling, but I rarely match the hatch. I am I would say obsessed, but I'm not. I really enjoy entomology, like the bug life. I like to flip rocks and look at them and see what's in the river, maybe play with the little nymphs. Where it's legal, I like to collect those bugs and use them as bait to traditionally K-roo fish, which K-roo fishing is a style of fixed line fishing, usually with a longer rod, where you use weight and bait instead of flies. Um, but that's a whole other. It's so much fun though, and where legal, I like to collect my own little stonefly nymphs and use them for bait. And that's it, you cannot get a more active bite than throwing live stoneflies to the fish. You will get a bite every cast. It's insane.
No, I'm right there with you. I actually carry a bear hook in my fly box for that purpose. Just a fly hook that I have nothing tied on, and it's in there just in case.
Yeah,
But no, you're right. You can't get a better bite than throwing what's actually in there. I mean, we can try to match it as close as physically possible, but there's always going to be those picky fish that are going to be able to tell when it's a real bug and not.
I think it's more about what you're doing rather than what you're throwing. It would help to be around the same size. I would say more so than like trying to match it exactly.
Yeah.
And then if the fish are rising, make your fly rise. If they're feeding off the bottom, use something that sinks. You don't necessarily need to match the hatch. Especially if you can see them actively feeding, just get it in their lane.
Yeah, that's one thing that I tell clients while I'm guiding all the time is they'll be like, well, this fly's not working. Do we need to switch it up? And I'm like, before we switch flies, let's look at what we're doing because there's 1,000 different possibilities of what we could be doing wrong that's causing fish not to bite. So as far as rods, I mean, we talked about your Sierra rod and you mentioned you like brighter rods and things like that. What does your rod lineup look like?
I might be missing one. I have like the entire Tenkara Rod Co lineup. I don't currently have the new collab rod with Topo Designs, but that is a collaboration with Topo, and it's just a new skin on a Sierra rod, which I have a Sierra rod. So I didn't feel that it's a really cool looking Sierra, though. My friend Taylor has one.
So we can expect you to get one soon then?
I mean, if you see me with one in my picture, don't be surprised.
Fair. My wife gets mad because I bring home new rods often.
Generally, if I'm out Tenkara fishing, if I can only bring one rod, I'm usually bringing the Yari.
Okay. So that would be your go-to then?
Yeah. On the Pacific Crest Trail, I took the Yari and the Beartooth. Those are my jam.
There you go.
I don't use the Beartooth as much anymore. I still try to give it love. I took it out the other day when I went camping, and it was a blast. I always forget how much fun it is. I took the White Cloud too. That one's super fun if you get hooked into a nice fish.
There you go. So when you're going out on the water, what does your standard pack look like? Are you more of a prepared, like have everything you could possibly need, or are you more of a minimalist?
I'd say a hybrid. I mean, I don't have everything. I know some guys that take the whole kitchen sink, but usually I have a small backpack. It's a Camelback. I believe it's 22 liters, so it's not very big. And that's 22-liter capacity. That's not like the size of my water bladder. That would be ridiculous. And then I often take my GoPro. Then I have a water filter, some snacks, um, bug spray and sunscreen, a bug mesh hat just in case, a first aid kit, a headlamp, a net, a couple fly boxes, and 2 or 3 rods, depending on if I'm bringing loaner rods for some friends.
So you mentioned kind of which rods you're using regularly. What are the rods that you're pairing together like most regular?
Like when I'm grabbing 2 or 3 rods.
Yeah.
It really depends where I'm going. I have like close quarters rods, like right now, the ones that are sitting in my backpack from a couple of days ago. I have the Sierra, the White Cloud, and the Beartooth.
Okay.
And I was fishing a tiny little, it's not even a creek, it's a man-made thing. But there's a bunch of trout in it, and it's 5 feet across, and there's trees all overhead, so I like to bring my short rods. Generally, if I'm going out, I'll bring the Yari, maybe the Kita, the 330 Kita. If not, then I'll bring the Sierra. Maybe I'll bring the Rocky if I'm going after some big fish. If I'm going to a lake, I'll definitely bring like the Rocky and a Sawtooth.
Okay. So getting into kind of the specifics of fishing, we talked a little bit about how there's a stream with smallmouth that just opened up recently. And fishing seasons vary by state. Is there a primary season for you guys in California, or is it just like there's always somewhere to fish?
Generally, there's always somewhere to fish, but the main season is April 30th. I want to say it's April 30th to November 15th.
Okay.
And then there's a couple winter steelhead fisheries that are only open from like October to November. I'd have to look there. It's literally only open for a month. It's crazy. And closed the whole rest of the year.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's really wild. But there's dams on that river, like big dams. So if you get above them, it's open all year. And that's really not going to name the river, but that's actually one of my favorite rivers to fish. Yeah.
Are you primarily bigger water or small streams?
I'd say when I'm not backpacking and I'm just fishing, I'm going out fishing, generally a mid-size.
Okay.
Most of the time I can wade across anywhere and I won't get more than chest deep, but there are a few holes where you would have to either swim or go up and find somewhere else to cross.
Sounds pretty regular.
Yeah, and not like tiny streams where I can just walk up the whole stream. That's usually only when I'm out in the high country backpacking, and I usually won't walk into the creek like that. That's usually sometimes hit or miss.
Perfect. Lost my spot on my paper here.
That's okay.
So, as far as the other gear in your bag, in addition to 2 or 3 rods if you're doing a backpacking trip, potentially more if you're bringing some rods for some other people, what other gear are you carrying with you on the water?
For fishing gear,
Yeah.
Net, usually, almost always a net, rubber basket, and that's it. Sunglasses. I always have a couple fly boxes, but they're not always on my person. I might on the shore and like wade out. Depends on if I'm if I'm just wading up creek for a couple miles, yeah, I'll carry it on me. And then I'll have like a Tenkara Rod Co miniature everyday pack, like strapped to the chest strap on my backpack. And then I just keep my fly boxes in line in there.
Very nice. As far as like, is there any specialty equipment, I guess, that you would carry with you?
Sometimes I'll carry I used to carry them everywhere. I carry these Ikari fly boxes. It's like a fly box and a line spool. It would be the closest to a specialty item.
Oh, those are sweet.
I used to use, this is the Ikari Model S, which I think has now been combined with his Ikari Model L. And I took the Ikari Model L with me everywhere. But just this last off season, I decided to retire it and hang it on my wall. It's made out of wood. It's getting a few cracks. I don't want to just use it until it breaks and dies. So
Right.
I turned it into a piece of art full of memories. I love it.
That's awesome. I mean, outside of what you've already mentioned, the only piece of gear or two pieces of gear that I always have a pair of nippers and forceps.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I should have.
It's all good.
Those are hanging on like the outer part of my chest strap thing.
Yeah. But I mean, if you find me in the water without, what's that?
Very occasionally, I'll bring floating.
Yeah. Yeah, depending on what season. I know coming up on fall, I'll have floating on me pretty often as elk hair caddis becomes the go-to fly.
I've been getting crazy success on elk hair caddis lately.
It's one of those flies where as soon as like mid-August hits, I'll pretty much always have a dry dropper with an elk hair caddis and then just a small kabari or a small nymph hanging off the bottom of it.
That's one thing I never do. I never run a multi-fly rig.
Is there a reason behind that, or you just haven't tried it?
I've tried it a couple times and got tangled more than I liked. So
Hey, I mean, each their own, right?
yeah, no, same. No judgment on anybody that uses indicators, or no judgment on anything. Fish your own fish.
I mean, that's just one of those things where when they're hitting that caddis, if you throw, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll throw a kabari underneath it that matches in color to the caddis, because they'll hit the caddis or they'll see that kabari coming through and think that it's a caddis that's just underwater. Yeah, and it fishes really well.
I get the idea and the premise behind it, but I haven't felt too big of a need to experiment down that way.
And I guess part of that for me might be coming from the Western fly fishing background. I mean,
I never Western fly fished.
Well, there's a lot to handle there. Tenkara is definitely the easier route to go.
I've tried it a few times since getting into Tenkara. I've gone out with some buddies that fly fish, and we've traded rods and had a little shootout to see who could catch more. And it's always good fun.
Oh yeah, and I'm willing to bet that it's almost always the Tenkara that catches more.
Yeah. Even when I put the Tenkara in his hand and I take his fly rod.
Yeah. It's simple and it's easy to do.
Yeah. It just works.
Yeah. That's the quote of the episode right there. It just works.
It just works.
It's insane. I mean, like you said, you catch more fish. It's simple. There's nothing to it. I mean, we mentioned earlier how you're not constantly back casting and things like that, and you can use your back cast to just flip it to a different spot. And it always blows people's mind when they come from a fly fishing background that they're not constantly back and forth. It's just backing in.
Anytime I do any types of false casting is if I'm using a dry fly and I really want to dry it off, I'll give it like 1 or 2 to.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. There's no need for it. I guess the other time that I will do a few more false casts is if I'm on still water and I'm changing completely the spot that I'm casting to as far as the angle goes. I might flip it around a couple more times just so I don't have to stop casting. I can just flip 2 or 3 times and then I'm over here.
That's fair.
But other than that, I mean, like you said, dry flies, drying them out, and that's it.
But yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like we should have talked about?
Nothing immediately jumps to mind.
All right. Well, we'll wrap things up here.
I would like to say that anybody that is listening to this that somehow has found this and doesn't Tenkara fish yet, if I may plug my,
Absolutely.
feel free to use my affiliate code and check out Tenkara Rod Co. and use my code NorcalTenkara for 20% off your entire order from their website. Same thing if you'd like one of those wooden fly boxes, use the same discount code NorcalTenkara for my card gear. And that one's for 15% off.
Perfect. If you'll send me the links to both of those as well as your discount code, I will punch that into the description so it's readily available for anyone that wants to use it.
Sweet.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for joining us. How can people follow your Tenkara journey?
You can follow me on pretty much any social media platform as NorcalTenkara. There's this new one called Threads. I haven't made one of those. I don't think I will. We'll see. But I think I'm on everything else, even TikTok. Yeah, it's wonderful. Feel free to check me out, shoot me a message, say hi.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for joining.
One more resource that I would like to plug that I don't think we talked about, I just thought about, is TenkaraAngler.com. They put out a yearly print magazine, but they also put out web articles, I think, more than once a week. Like, they're cranking them out. And it's a great resource with years of backlog catalog of Tenkara information. Same thing with Tenkara Talk. Check out that. And yeah, there's Tenkara Path. I'm sure I'm leaving out some wonderful resources.
There's some great ones out there. And I mean, honestly, you get on Google, type in Tenkara, and you're going to have more information than you'll ever know what to do with.
Right.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again, Nick. Feel free to reach out to Nick on Instagram, like you said, NorcalTenkara. You can reach myself on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara, or shoot me an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. We are still looking for people to fill the 50 states for our 50 states series. We've got 4 states so far done. We're still shooting for a lot more. So definitely reach out if you or someone you know would be a good fit for an episode. Let me know. We'd love to hear from you. Other than that,
I might have a friend in Hawaii.
That is one that I'm not sure where I was going to find someone. So we need to talk about that.
Send me a message.
I will. Perfect. Well, thanks, guys, and tune in next time to the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast. This has been the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast, hosted by Brendan Harden. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara. You can also shoot us an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out with any suggestions for future episodes, or if you or someone you know would like to be featured on the show, or you think they'd be a good fit, shoot us a message and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time, and Let's Talk Tenkara, a Salt Lake Tenkara production.